Hello, my name is Laura Tapia, and today I will be presenting Studying Internalized Misogyny by Understanding Women's Perception of Men versus Women when presented with identical materials. So I think it's important to first define what internalized misogyny is and why it's important for us to understand it. Internalized misogyny is how the societal biases against women teach them to be more judgmental towards other women than they are towards men when faced with the same situation. We've seen this a lot in society. A man who takes up a lot of space and is very boisterous is called a leader, and a woman who does the same is called too ambitious. Um, Internalized misogyny is taking concepts similar to that and understanding how they affect women in relation to other women. It's especially important to understand this because we are being bombarded with the false narrative that women are competition with one another to be the women of the group. We see this in our news, we see this in our politics, and we see it a lot in our media. Everything from children cartoons to sophisticated pieces that are aimed to be empowering for women end up missing the mark because of this ideal of internalized misogyny. So here are some examples in popular media of how internalized misogyny is taught to young women. We see in the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy a group of strong, powerful men, and then one woman, whether it be Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow or Zoe Saldana as Gamora. We only see one, which kind of makes people think that there only can be one. Similarly, in Ratatouille and the Smurfs, Colette and Smurfette are the only women in the entire show. Even Wonder Woman, oh my gosh, the beginning does a very good job of showing how these women are building each other up, but then the only one who ever gets any sort of victory or call to action is Wonder Woman herself. I'm going to read this slide word for word because I think it's that important of a statement. Women have suffered through many injustices and had to fight for their rights. As we strive for a fairer, better, and more equitable society, we must understand and accept that even though gender disparities have been worse in the past, we still have a long ways to go until the gap is closed. Understanding internalized misogyny specifically is important because women have been taught harmful structures in which they equate other women to an obstacle. We should not be each other's enemies, rather a support system of individuals fighting for the same cause. So now on to my study. In this study, I took participants from our Oklahoma City University campus community, and I gave them a packet of different scenarios and examples of things that happened both to men and women. Now, the contents of the packet were virtually identical. The only difference between the four packets, were if the gender of the protagonist of the fictitious scenario, the gender of the job applicant, and the gender of a photograph, if it was a man or a woman. And I hypothesized that the scenarios that featured a woman would be more highly criticized. So I hypothesized that an imperfect job candidate who is a woman would be less likely to be hired for a job than an imperfect job candidate who is a man. I also included pictures of professionals at their desk in a slouched position and asked participants to rate their levels of engagement, professionalism, and posture. And I expected for women to be more harshly critiqued for a bad posture. I also presented them with a fictitious scenario of a college student who went to a party as a member of a Greek letter organization, participated in underage drinking, and had a sexual encounter with a person at the party that they had just met that night. Unfortunately, my results did not yield statistical significance, and my hypothesis was not supported by any of the data collected. So these are the different data charts for the scenario in which I gave them a resume and a cover letter and asked them if they would hire the job applicants. Now, you may notice that I had a sample size of 9 women, but I only had 8 answers to the question of would you hire this candidate, yes or no? And I will talk more about that later, but I did want to introduce that right now. So as you'll see here, these numbers are not statistically significant. In order for the results to be significant, it would have to be less than 0.05. And here I show the data from the fictitious scenario. So the questions that were presented to the participants, the first question was, what word do you associate with the protagonist of the scenario? And after they gave their answers in a free form, I asked them to go back and rate the connotation of each of their answers on a scale of 1 to 5, ranging from a very negative connotation to a very positive connotation. And you'll see the mean difference here. I also asked them what they thought about the protagonist being a member of a sorority or fraternity organization. I asked how they felt about this protagonist flirting with various members at the party. And I asked their opinion on underage drinking and the one-night sexual encounter. I was very much expecting that the man would be judged, given more of a pass. You know, men are often called players while women are often called sluts. I was expecting something very similar to that, but the results were actually not significant at all. There was no real clear difference in the perception of men versus women in this scenario. The last group of statistics that I'd like to present is the responses to the picture. I again was expecting that a man would be rated higher in his engagement and professionalism, while a woman would be more harshly critiqued by other women. That was not the case. The results, again, were statistically insignificant. In conclusion, my study flopped. Why did it flop? Most likely because I had a very low sample size. Due to COVID restrictions and the snowstorm and midterms and everything being smushed together, I had a very limited amount of time and resources for creating this study. And unfortunately, I did not recruit enough participants for this study to accurately reflect the population. I also had one missing result due to unclear instructions. And so when I replicate this study in the future, I will be using a higher sample size. I will be having more direct outreach to potential participants. I will provide clearer instructions to the participants, and I will designate a space for the participant to write their hiring decision. In this version of the study, I asked them to, after evaluating the materials, write on the packet yes or no. But I did not designate a particular spot for them to write yes or no. So in the future, I will do that in hopes of having everyone complete the study entirely. Thank you so much for allowing me to present my project. For a list of references, I can be contacted at lstapia@my.okcu.edu.